Hello, this is Chris Wilhelm, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Friday, January 16th issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Under Trump, a shift toward absolute immunity for ICE. Since the fatal shooting of Renee Good in Minneapolis, administration officials have defended the use of deadly force, which agency guidelines say should be a last resort. By Hamed Ali-Aziz and Nicholas Nehamis. The instructions to Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents explain in clear terms how to defuse dangerous encounters, use minimal force when trying to remove people from cars, issue commands in professional, firm, courteous voices. First step in arresting an occupant of a vehicle is not to reach in and grab him unless there are specific circumstances requiring that action, reads one internal ICE document providing legal guidance for uses of force during vehicle stops. It was reviewed by the New York Times along with other training materials. ICE officials will thoroughly investigate any encounter, but deadly force is allowed only when agents believe lives are in danger. The fatal shooting of Renee Good last week by an ICE agent in Minneapolis and the quick reaction by Trump administration officials to declare the agent a hero and Ms. Good a villain has put a new focus on whether federal agents enforcing President Trump's deportation drive have been properly prepared for confrontations on city streets. The response of Mr. Trump and his top lieutenants to the killing has also underscored how they have embraced what is supposed to be a last resort under the written standards, using lethal force in self-defense. Rather than encourage agents to de-escalate combustible encounters, as the agency guidelines emphasize, Mr. Trump and his lieutenants have provided tacit approval for more aggressive tactics. Several weeks before the shooting, a top ICE official told officers to take decisive action if threatened. Immediately after, Mr. Trump and other administration officials said Ms. Good had tried to run the agent over, although a Times video analysis found that she appeared to have turned her vehicle away from him. That guy is protected by absolute immunity, Vice President J.D. Vance said last week of the ICE agent who killed Ms. Good, 37. He was doing his job. On Tuesday, the Homeland Security Department reiterated that sentiment to its agents, posting a clip on social media of Stephen Miller, a White House Deputy Chief of Staff, saying you have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties. Tensions in Minneapolis have boiled over in the days since Ms. Good's death. On Wednesday night, a federal agent in the city shot and wounded a man who was attacking him, officials said. The episode led to hours of clashes between protesters and law enforcement officers. Abigail Jackson, a White House spokeswoman, said ICE agents were using appropriate tactics. The entire Trump administration stands behind our heroic ICE officers who are conducting themselves with the utmost professionalism and integrity while making American communities safer, Ms. Jackson said in a statement. It is not an aggressive tactic to defend yourself from an individual using their car as a deadly weapon. ICE officers have a right to self-defense. Tricia McLaughlin, a Homeland Security spokeswoman, said that ICE law enforcement officers are trained to use minimum amount of force necessary to resolve dangerous situations, to prioritize the safety of the public and our officers, and are highly trained in de-escalation tactics. The Minneapolis shooting has also revealed the risks of Mr. Trump's decision to send ICE on large-scale sweeps through cities, a move that has thrust agents into confrontations with hostile crowds. Most ICE agents are not trained to handle crowd control, according to a 2021 report by the Government Accountability Office. That is in part because ICE has historically focused on targeted arrests that attract less attention and rarely put its officers in conflict with the public. Moreover, the agency is rapidly expanding its ranks, already more than doubling its number of law enforcement personnel after an infusion of $75 billion in new funding over 4 years. It has expedited its training programs to accommodate the new recruits, including reducing training on how to handle vehicle stops, according to a former official at the federal government's Law Enforcement Academy who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal Homeland Security policies. Ms. McLaughlin said there has been no reduction in training on vehicle stops. Federal officers do not have absolute immunity from prosecution, although the U.S. Constitution makes it difficult for states to prosecute them for actions taken while on duty. They can also face federal charges, but that is unlikely to happen in the Minneapolis case. In a sign of the administration's priorities, the Justice Department has decided to investigate Ms. Good's widow and groups that monitor and protest immigration agents, rather than open a civil rights inquiry into whether the actions of the ICE agent, Jonathan Ross, were legal. In a statement, Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, said there was no basis for a criminal civil rights investigation into the shooting. Administration officials have said ICE will conduct an internal investigation. Mr. Trump has shown no signs of ordering ICE to back off, raising the possibility of further conflicts between agents and protesters. "Fear not, great people of Minnesota, the day of reckoning and retribution is coming," he wrote on social media on Tuesday. Scott Schuchart, a senior ICE official in the Biden administration, said the message from Trump administration officials to agents was to disregard their years or decades of training and disregard what lawyers have told them. The Times reviewed internal Homeland Security documents that included training manuals, use of force guidelines, legal guidance prepared by ICE lawyers, and firearms policies. The training materials are from 2025, while the guidelines on use of force were published in 2023 and remain current. The documents spotlight the importance of techniques intended to avoid heated confrontations. When feasible, authorized officers must employ tactics to de-escalate by the use of communication or other techniques during an encounter to stabilize, slow, or reduce the intensity of a potentially violent situation, one document states. The documents also describe a use of force continuum that officers may follow. The continuum begins with officers being present on the scene with a professional, courteous demeanor. It progresses to using verbal commands. Officers may then deploy soft techniques like the use of touch pressure points or chemical agents, and then hard techniques such as strikes with a hand, arm, foot, leg, head, or the whole body, or the use of impact weapons. The final step is deadly force, including firearms, strangulation techniques, and edged weapons. When officers use force, they must be offered psychological first aid services as soon as possible. The materials make clear that officers are entitled to escalate the use of force as quickly as they see fit and can use lethal measures if there is an imminent danger of serious bodily injury or death to the officer or to another person. In Ms. Good's case, the question of whether Mr. Ross was in danger has been a point of contention. Videos show federal agents quickly approaching the maroon SUV that she had stopped on the street on January 7th, partially blocking the road. One of the agents cursed as he demanded that Ms. Good get out of the car before almost immediately trying to open the driver's side door, reaching through the open window. After Ms. Good drove her car forward, Mr. Ross, who had been walking in front of her vehicle and recording video on his cell phone, shot and killed her. Mr. Ross was an experienced ICE officer who served as a firearms instructor for the agency's field office in St. Paul, Minnesota, and also received extra training as a member of its tactical team. The tactical team members typically receive crowd control training. In court records, he described serving in the Iraq War. But he and the ICE agents involved in the shooting of Ms. Good may not have followed some aspects of their training, documents and interviews suggest. ICE officers are generally advised not to stand in front of or behind stopped vehicles to avoid being run over, according to 3 former senior agency officials. A lawyer for Mr. Ross did not respond to a request for comment. While opportunities for oversight have been rare under the Trump administration, the department's Inspector General's office said in an online notice that it was conducting an audit of ICE's hiring and training processes. In addition, the office has started an audit of how ICE investigates allegations of excessive use of force and disciplines officers. That audit began this month. Initial review finds no widespread illegal voting by migrants, puncturing a Trump claim. Republican election officials welcome the review, which relies on a federal verification tool, but they say they have not discovered a major problem when it comes to non-citizen voters. By Alexandra Berzon and Nick Corasanidi. It was a common refrain for Donald J. Trump and his allies during the 2024 campaign. The Biden administration was purposely encouraging mass numbers of immigrants to cross the border in order to vote illegally. As president, Mr. Trump has pushed his administration to address the alleged crimes, including prompting many states to uphold tens of millions of voter records through a federal immigration verification tool run out of the Department of Homeland Security. But with the review underway, the results so far indicate there is no evidence of widespread fraud, according to interviews with government officials and documents reviewed by the New York Times. Out of 49.5 million voter registrations that have been checked, the department referred around 10,000 cases to Homeland Security investigations for further investigation of non-citizenship, or roughly 0.02% of the names processed, according to Matthew Trageser, a spokesman for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the DHS agency that oversees the program. A Justice Department spokeswoman also said the administration believed around 10,000 registered non-citizen voters had been found. They did not specify how many of those people had voted. Even that number could be inflated. The verification tool has mistakenly flagged some people who appear to actually be citizens, according to some local election officials. In Charlotte County, Florida, for instance, the election supervisor, Leah Valenti, an appointee of Ron DeSantis, the Republican governor, said she found that just 15 out of 176,000 names she uploaded to DHS came back as non-citizens. Of those, she found that 3 were people mistakenly added to the rolls who never intended to register to vote. They have since been removed. 2 others already sent in documentation to prove their naturalized citizenship, she said. We didn't get a mass onslaught of people, said Ms. Valenti, who is a proponent of using the DHS system to verify voters' eligibility. We have clean voter rolls. Mr. Trageser said the program was doing exactly what it is supposed to do, providing states with an easy-to-use tool to stop aliens from hijacking our elections. While the findings affirm that non-citizens do sometimes wind up on the voter rolls, the small numbers so far puncture the claims that Mr. Trump and his allies have made for the past decade that elections are riddled with illegal votes cast by undocumented immigrants. Studies consistently show little, if any, evidence for such crimes on a large scale. The review, which is voluntary for states or local election departments, has prompted complaints from officials in Democratic-run states who have declined to participate. They have warned that the system could effectively create a federal database containing personal information on some 200 million people, with the risk of erroneously flagging legal voters and impeding their access to the ballot box. We're talking about a system here that is unproven, untested, and therefore unreliable, said Steve Simon, the Democratic Secretary of State in Minnesota and former president of the nonpartisan National Association of Secretaries of State. Abigail Jackson, a White House spokeswoman, suggested that the newly expanded verification program might identify more non-citizens if it were used by Democratic states, many of which have voter ID laws and other voter restrictions that are less strict than those in some Republican states. This process takes time, especially given strong opposition from blue states, with notoriously bad voter roll maintenance, that have refused to check their rolls against the DHS system, Ms. Jackson said. Election officials in Democratic-run states say they already have effective ways to ensure only citizens are voting in federal elections. The DHS-run program has long been used primarily to help government officials verify citizenship status for people applying for driver's licenses or trying to gain access to health care or Social Security benefits. For years, some local election officials have had arrangements with DHS to use the tool to verify citizenship of voters. But the program, called the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements, or SAVE, was not designed for the mass uploads that would be needed to fully vet voter rolls. Under the first Trump administration, officials explored the idea of expanding the tool by making it easier for election officials to use. But some Homeland Security officials worried that doing so would lead to mistakes and could potentially disenfranchise voters based on faulty matches or determinations. Yet last year, the administration moved to expand the use of the SAVE system for voter records in response to an executive order from Mr. Trump. It began sending invites to state election officials that would allow them to upload voter data on a mass scale, including full name, date of birth, and social security numbers, to check for anyone who is not a citizen on their voter rolls. The administration has also, for the first time, brought in data from the Social Security Administration that had previously been kept separate. At least 14 states, all with Republican secretaries of state, publicly indicated last year that they would use the revamped DHS system to upload voter information, according to an analysis of public statements, records, and interviews with people involved. 11 Democratic secretaries of state wrote a letter to DHS in December, raising alarms about the potential impact on eligible voters, warning that the expanded version of SAVE will introduce unnecessary and unwarranted reliability, privacy, and security issues into the sensitive voter information data we are entrusted to protect. Many Democratic states have also refused to provide similar information to the Department of Justice, which is suing at least 24 states that have refused to turn over data. Even if the data does not show widespread illegal voting, some Trump allies say that weeding out any cases is worthwhile. I would say a single illegal ballot is one too many, said Jason Sneed, who leads the Honest Elections Project, a conservative elections group. Phil McGrain, the Idaho Secretary of State, said in an interview that his spot checks using SAVE had found small numbers of non-citizens on the voter rolls, but he appreciated that DHS had made the tool easier to use. The cases are rare, but it can happen, and tools make it less burdensome and less work, Mr. McGrain said. I think upgrades have been really beneficial to the system overall. In some cases, the reviews are identifying voters who appear to be citizens, inviting more confusion, election officials say. In Missouri, 70 county clerks in December signed a letter sent to state House and Senate leadership describing the system as flawed, saying it regularly included individuals we know to be U.S. citizens, our neighbors, colleagues, and even voters we have personally registered at naturalization ceremonies. St. Louis County, Missouri, found that around 35% of roughly 690 people initially flagged by the SAVE tool were registered at naturalization ceremonies, said Rick Stream, a Republican election director for the county. A spokeswoman for the Missouri Secretary of State's office said that the state's review using the SAVE tool was still in the early stages and that it would not be based solely on the tool itself. Any potential issues identified through this process must be researched, verified, and resolved at the local level in accordance with Missouri law and due process, she said. In South Carolina, a top election official emailed a wide array of federal agencies expressing confusion over the tool after seeing preliminary results in July. Unfortunately, the information has raised more questions than it answered, she wrote, according to emails obtained by American Oversight, a watchdog group. In Louisiana, the system found 403 non-citizens out of 3 million registered voters, or 0.01%, with 83 having voted, according to a November memo obtained by the Times through a public records request. The memo also identified that some of the people were eligible for prosecution. I want to be clear, non-citizens illegally registering or voting is not a systemic problem in Louisiana, Secretary of State Nancy Landry, a Republican, said in a public statement in September. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The biggest U.S. crypto company asserts its power in Washington. The top executive of the crypto exchange Coinbase scuttled a planned Senate committee vote on a major cryptocurrency bill after voicing his concerns, a sign of the company's clout. By David Yaffe Bellamy. A major cryptocurrency bill was headed for a committee vote in the Senate on Thursday after months of negotiations, a crucial step in the legislative process. Then came a social media post from the top executive of Coinbase, the largest U.S. crypto company. Coinbase unfortunately can't support the bill as written, Brian Armstrong, chief executive of Coinbase, posted on X on Wednesday evening. This version would be materially worse than the current status quo. We'd rather have no bill than a bad bill. Within hours, the Senate vote was canceled. The fate of a hotly contested legislative vote typically hinges on a few key lawmakers who are the moderate voices in a partisan scuffle. But what happened this week to the landmark crypto bill shows how much power Coinbase now wields in Washington, with the crypto industry newly ascendant under President Trump. For months, congressional staff had worked on the Clarity Act, a nearly 300-page bill designed to establish a regulatory framework for virtually every aspect of crypto, with rules the industry helped write. But at the last minute, Mr. Armstrong objected to proposed language that threatened to outlaw one of Coinbase's products and said the bill would assign too much authority to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the nation's top financial regulator. Coinbase's decisive intervention follows years of the company's work to build a voice in Washington. A publicly traded firm worth nearly $70 billion, Coinbase helped finance a network of political action committees that spent more than $130 million to influence congressional races in 2024, aiming to elect pro-crypto legislators. The barrage of political spending sent an unmistakable message to Congress. Anyone who crosses the crypto industry could become a target. Now, the industry's leading firms have leverage to push for their interests. Coinbase has played its hand very well, said Todd Phillips, a finance expert at Georgia State University. A representative for Coinbase did not offer a comment. Founded in 2012, Coinbase provides a marketplace for people to buy, sell, and store cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ether. Anyone can log onto the app and make a purchase with a few clicks. It wasn't long ago, though, that the company faced a much tougher landscape in Washington. In 2023, the SEC sued Coinbase for operating as an unregistered exchange, part of the Biden administration's broad-reaching crackdown on crypto. Mr. Armstrong, who had co-founded the company, attacked the SEC for regulation by enforcement and called for more clarity around crypto rules. Mr. Trump's election in 2024 changed everything. Shortly before taking office, he and his sons started a crypto business, and Mr. Trump proclaimed that he would make the United States the crypto capital of the planet. Within weeks of Mr. Trump's inauguration, the SEC dropped its cases against Coinbase and other crypto firms. The industry pushed for legislation that would enshrine that regulatory pullback in law, preventing a future administration from reviving the crackdown. In July, with the administration's support, the House passed its version of the Clarity Act, which essentially adopted the crypto industry's concept for a new regulatory system. The bill would make it much easier for crypto firms like Coinbase to declare that digital currencies are not securities, subject to the system of federal oversight designed to protect investors and markets. But the legislation faced hurdles in the Senate. In the fall, Senate Democrats proposed strict rules on decentralized finance, a branch of the crypto world, prompting outrage in the industry. At the same time, banking lobbyists pushed for language to prevent crypto exchanges like Coinbase from paying interest to people who own stablecoins, a type of digital currency designed to maintain a price of $1. They argued that the exchanges would undermine banks by providing a product that competed with traditional deposit accounts. The issue soon became a sticking point for Coinbase. A ban on interest could compromise one of its revenue sources. The way you compete is that you offer these types of incentive programs, said Kara Calvert, a top policy executive at Coinbase. It's absolutely critical. The Senate's most recent draft of the Clarity Act was unveiled close to midnight on Monday. Congressional staff members and crypto executives rushed to comb through it before the Senate committee meeting scheduled for Thursday, known as a markup, where senators would have a chance to introduce amendments to the bill. With the markup fast approaching, Mr. Armstrong said he was pulling his support, even as other crypto executives posted messages of support for the legislation. On Wednesday night, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, the Republican chairman of the Banking Committee, said the markup would be postponed to an unspecified date. Everyone remains at the table working in good faith, he said in a statement. The goal is to deliver clear rules of the road that protect consumers, strengthen our national security, and ensure the future of finance is built in the United States. The U.S. is pressing Mexico to allow U.S. forces to fight cartels. The United States is escalating pressure on the Mexican government to permit the U.S. military to target fentanyl labs, according to American officials. By Maria Abi-Habib, Julian E. Barnes, Eric Schmidt, and Tyler Pager. The United States is intensifying pressure on Mexico to allow U.S. military forces to conduct joint operations to dismantle fentanyl labs inside the country, according to American officials. The push comes as President Trump presses on the Mexican government to grant the United States a larger role in the battle against drug cartels that produce fentanyl and smuggle it into the United States. The proposal was first raised early last year and then largely dropped, officials said. But the request was renewed after U.S. forces captured President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela on January 3rd, and has involved the highest levels of government, including the White House, according to multiple officials. U.S. officials want American forces, either special operation troops or CIA officers, to accompany Mexican soldiers on raids on suspected fentanyl labs, according to American officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive diplomatic issues and military planning. Such joint operations would be a significant expansion of the United States' role in Mexico, and one that the Mexican government has so far adamantly opposed. The country's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, has repeatedly said that the two nations would work together to fight the cartels, but that her government rejected the U.S.'s proposal of sending American troops across the border. Mr. Trump generally insists on the participation of U.S. forces, she said in a news conference shortly after speaking with Mr. Trump on the phone Monday morning. We always say that it is not necessary, she said, adding he was receptive, listened, gave his opinion, and we agreed to continue working together. The White House declined to comment, but last week Mr. Trump told Fox News that more needed to be done in Mexico to counter the drug cartels. We've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by water, and we are going to start now hitting land with regard to the cartels, he said, specifically those in Mexico. Instead of joint operations, Mexican officials offered counter-proposals this month, including increased information sharing and for the United States to play a greater role inside command centers, according to a person familiar with the matter. U.S. advisors are already in Mexican military command posts, according to American officials, sharing intelligence to help Mexican forces in their anti-drug operations. Mexican officials are under pressure to reach an agreement, as some American officials would like to see the U.S. military or CIA conduct drone strikes against suspected drug labs, a violation of Mexican sovereignty that would significantly weaken the government. But fentanyl labs are notoriously difficult to find and destroy, U.S. officials say, and Washington is still developing tools to trace the drug as it is being produced. The labs emit less chemical traces than meth labs, which can be detected by drones, and are often cooked in urban areas with the rudimentary tools found in a family kitchen, according to current and former officials. Meth and cocaine labs, however, need much larger spaces, making them easier to detect. Under the Biden administration, the CIA began carrying out secret drone flights over Mexico to identify possible locations of fentanyl labs, an operation that has expanded since Mr. Trump took office. The drones are used both to find labs and track precursor chemicals as they arrive in Mexican seaports and then transported to their destinations, according to an American official briefed on the operation. That intelligence is currently handed off to Mexican military units, many of which have been trained by American Special Operation Forces. Mexican troops then plan and execute the raids to take out the labs. Under Washington's new proposal, American forces would participate in the raids with Mexican forces in the lead, commanding the mission and making key decisions, according to people familiar with the talks, including American officials. But U.S. forces would be in support, providing intelligence and advice to frontline Mexican troops. Asked about the planning for Mexico, the Defense Department said in a statement that it stands ready to execute the orders of the Commander-in-Chief at any time and in any place. A spokeswoman for the CIA declined to comment. The success of this month's Venezuela raid seems to have emboldened the Trump administration. Soon after that operation, Mr. Trump said regime change in Cuba was next and resurrected demands that Washington take control of Greenland. While Washington has focused on Mr. Maduro and Venezuela as a main source of the drugs smuggled into the United States, the South American country in fact plays a minor role in the illicit trade. The majority of drugs smuggled into the United States come through the 2,000-mile border it shares with Mexico. Fentanyl is also responsible for the bulk of overdose deaths in the United States and is by far the most dangerous street drug. Last year, the White House designated fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction, and several Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. The Trump administration started pushing for U.S. forces inside Mexico shortly after coming to power last year. But Mexican officials have consistently rejected those proposals, demanding that Washington respect their sovereignty. "We have highly trained army units and special forces," Mexico's security chief Omar Garcia Harfuch said in an interview last month. "What would they be needed for?" he added, referring to U.S. forces. "What we need is information." American troops inside Mexico is a particularly fraught issue, considering the shared history. The United States has invaded Mexico nearly a dozen times and launched several land grabs that included Texas and California. That deep distrust has gradually diminished over the last 3 decades, with Mexico working more closely with American forces and sharing more intelligence, particularly with agents from the Drug Enforcement Administration. Mr. Harfuch said that fewer than several hundred U.S. security personnel are in Mexico, and that all are unarmed and all are approved by Mexican officials. DEA agents in Mexico mostly build cases with Mexican forces and are barred from participating in anti-drug ground operations. But former American officials who have worked with Mexican forces say that if Mr. Trump pushes too far, that cooperation could break down. Ms. Sheinbaum is in a precarious situation. If she accepts Washington's demands for joint operations with U.S. forces, she could see a revolt within her own political party, a leftist organization that harbors deep suspicions of the United States. But if the Trump administration decides to launch a unilateral military strike inside Mexico without the Mexican leader's knowledge, she could rapidly lose support within her ruling party and among Mexican voters. The proposal for joint operations also runs up against recent Mexican laws that restrict foreign troops on Mexican soil, including a constitutional amendment passed last year. Soon after the attack in Venezuela, the Mexican Senate delayed its January 5th vote to allow U.S. Navy Special Forces into Mexico for joint training exercises beginning later this month. The Senate is required under the country's constitution to grant approval for the entry of foreign troops. Ms. Sheinbaum, who had originally requested the entry of the U.S. troops, denied last week that the delay was related to the Venezuela attack, saying it was because the Senate was not yet in session. But a Mexican senator said the postponement was indeed because of the U.S. action. Ms. Sheinbaum has tapped Mr. Harfuch to go harder on the cartels since coming to power in late 2024. Since then, Mexico has deployed hundreds of forces to the state of Sinaloa to counter the Sinaloa cartel, the world's largest distributor of fentanyl, leading to high-profile arrests and a splintering and weakening of the drug organization. The government says it is arresting cartel members and destroying drug labs at nearly 4 times the rate of the previous government. "We're not saying the problem is solved," Mr. Harfuch said. But he added, "What we're doing is hitting the criminal structure at the bottom, in the middle, and at the top." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Kiev's Cruelest Winter. Russia knocks out the heat in the bitter cold. The Kremlin has tried for years to freeze Ukraine into submission. This winter, its attacks have been the most devastating ever. By Andrew Kramer. They lived in a comfortable, spacious apartment in a fashionable neighborhood of Kyiv, what they called our little fortress, through years of war. Even after it was damaged in a missile strike, they stayed put in the Ukrainian capital, renting another apartment. But this week, Russian drone and missile strikes left Kyiv in the grip of its worst heating and electricity outage of the war. The couple, Yulia Mikhailiuk, a lawyer, and Ihor Honcharuk, a TV station manager, could see their breath indoors as temperatures outside peaked around 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Mr. Honcharuk jury-rigged a heater by placing a brick over a gas burner on the stove, to little avail. They had had enough. They bundled their 1-year-old son in a car and abandoned Kyiv for a relative's home in a village. "I don't want to say this is uncomfortable," Ms. Mikhailiuk said before leaving town. Her son, Markian, was swaddled in a ball of fleeces and vests, his arms jutting out awkwardly. "This is much more than uncomfortable." Just as Kyiv has entered a deep winter freeze, Russia has intensified a campaign to knock out the city's heating and electrical infrastructure. The attacks are intended to dent the population's morale and pressure the government to make concessions in peace talks brokered by the Trump administration. This is not the first time that Kyiv, a city of 3 million, has endured power cuts as Russia has tried and failed to freeze Ukraine's largest city. This year, though, Russian missile and drone attacks are having a serious impact. Power has been out for days on end. About 500 apartment buildings have no heat at all, city authorities said, the most dramatic breakdown so far in the war. While most of the fighting has raged at a distance from Kyiv, in the country's east, the capital is still a symbolic prize. It is out of reach of Russian ground forces, but within range of exploding drones and missiles. Russia's goal is to render it uninhabitable. While Kyiv has carried on remarkably well through the years of war, it is most vulnerable when the weather turns cold. In the first winter after the all-out invasion in February 2022, Moscow tried to bring down the nationwide grid. That proved too ambitious, as Ukraine coped by rerouting electricity around damaged equipment. Other strategies have included targeting transformer stations serving nuclear plants, major sources of power for Ukraine. This winter, Russia narrowed its focus to 3 cities, Kyiv, Odessa, and Dnipro, said Alexander Karchenko, director of the Energy Industry Research Center, a consulting company. Russia's aim seems to be to isolate these cities from the national network and then blow up their power plants. Volleys are repeated about every 2 weeks, timed to disrupt repairs. They try to hit areas where maintenance is in progress, he said. "We have a lot of wounded and killed energy workers." Last Friday, Russia hit transformer substations in and around Kyiv. Those strikes cut the capital from power elsewhere in the country. Russia also hit all 3 natural gas and coal-burning power plants in Kyiv, shutting down the city's internal sources of heat and electricity. Lights in the city blinked out. Kyiv became an icy tableau of streets coated in hoarfrost and snowbanks glistening in the winter sun. On Tuesday, the city, which typically consumes about 2,000 megawatts of electricity, was surviving on less than a tenth of that, Mr. Karchenko said. The authorities routed what power there was to water pumps, the subway, and other critical infrastructure. Most residential buildings were cut off. As temperatures plunged, the heating, too, went out for many of Kyiv's residents. The city's power plants produce both electricity and hot water through a district heating system. The authorities rerouted hot water from a network of gas-powered boilers to compensate. They provide far less heat. "We are fighting to survive," Vitaly Klitschko, Kyiv's mayor and a former heavyweight boxing champion, said in an interview on Tuesday during a visit to a retirement home now heated by an emergency boiler. Russia, he said, is trying to destroy the mood of the population. "Putin doesn't need us as a population," Mr. Klitschko said of President Vladimir Putin's attempt to conquer the country. "He needs property. He needs Ukraine." The city's air defense shield is running low on ammunition, he said, particularly American-made Patriot interceptors. He appealed to Ukraine's Western allies to increase supplies. "It's a question of the lives of the civilian population," he said. "Please help us." Repeated strikes are complicating repairs, Mr. Klitschko said. Some infrastructure that Russia hit on Friday's barrage was hit again on Monday night, he said. Mr. Klitschko has asked residents to temporarily move in with relatives in other towns if they can, in case conditions in the capital unravel, but he is not calling for a sweeping evacuation. Russia's strikes have stirred political infighting, reviving concerns that Ukrainians might turn on one another amid the hardship. President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Mr. Klitschko's office has done very little to prepare for the Russian attacks. Mr. Klitschko said that city workers had done all they could and that politics should wait. The two are longtime rivals. One recent day in a Kyiv neighborhood, the sun glistened off shards of glass like thousands of tiny mirrors as residents swept up and nailed tarpaulins over broken windows. A Russian drone had apparently missed its target and hit a housing block. Volodymyr Dorodko, 23, a lawyer, had slept the night before in his down parka. After the overnight explosion nearby, he was out looking at the debris, including wispy flakes of black carbon fiber composite from the drone's wings. This is now a daily scene in Kyiv. "A lot of people are tired," Mr. Dorodko said. "The hardships," he added, "are pushing some Ukrainians to argue that the war should be ended, even at a steep cost like territorial concessions. The mothers of sons in the army are saying it directly. Let's give them the Donbass so people don't die and we aren't bombed," Mr. Dorodko said. He said he opposed handing over that eastern Ukrainian region, as Russia has demanded, because he said it would only whet the Kremlin's appetite for more. Ukrainians, Mr. Dorodko said, have little choice but to hang on. He said he saw one upside of losing heat in addition to electricity. His groceries don't spoil when the refrigerator loses power. He simply puts them on a cold windowsill. Ms. Mikhailiuk and Mr. Honcharek, the couple with the toddler son, kept trying to have a normal life throughout the war. Then came this winter. The apartment was unbearably cold. "People think if a peace deal is near, the situation might be better," Ms. Mikhailiuk said. But that is not true. It is not better. It's getting worse. Machado presents Trump with her Nobel Peace Prize medal. The Venezuelan opposition leader's efforts to share her award with the U.S. president have shaken some Norwegians' faith in their signature soft power tool. By Max Bierek and Henrik Preiser-Libel. Maria Corina Machado, Venezuela's opposition leader and last year's Nobel Peace Prize winner, presented her prize to President Trump on Thursday during a meeting in the White House. Mr. Trump took to social media several hours later to thank her. "Maria presented me with her Nobel Peace Prize for the work I have done," he wrote. "Such a wonderful gesture of mutual respect. Thank you, Maria." The White House shared on social media an image of Mr. Trump holding the frame containing the Nobel medal. The inscription reads that his principled and decisive action to secure a free Venezuela has been recognized. The Norwegian Nobel Institute has said the Peace Prize is not transferable. For her part, Ms. Machado, speaking to reporters earlier after meeting with Mr. Trump, said she had made the presentation as a recognition for his unique commitment to our freedom. The highly unusual gesture came after months of clamoring by the American president that he had deserved the prize that she was awarded for seeking to usher a peaceful transition to democracy in Venezuela. Ms. Machado had repeatedly dedicated the prize to Mr. Trump and praised the U.S. military operation nearly 2 weeks ago that ousted Venezuela's longtime authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro. Mr. Trump has made clear that he thought he had deserved the prize, saying he had ended several wars and castigating Norway for overlooking him. Beyond cheering U.S. intervention in her country, Ms. Machado has remained mum about a bombing campaign against boats that Mr. Trump says are smuggling drugs. The American strikes have killed more than 100 people. It is unclear what Ms. Machado gained out of her meeting with Mr. Trump. After ousting Mr. Maduro, he declined to install her in power, saying that she is a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect needed to lead the country. Independently verified vote counts in Venezuela's 2024 presidential election showed that Ms. Machado's party had beaten Mr. Maduro by a wide margin. The Venezuelan authorities nonetheless declared Mr. Maduro the victor, and his government embarked on a harsh repression campaign against critics of the outcome. Ms. Machado's efforts to cozy up to Mr. Trump have been met with scorn across the Atlantic Ocean in Norway, where the prize is regarded not just as prestigious and freighted with symbolism, but also as the country's primary soft power tool, and where Mr. Trump is deeply unpopular. The Nobel Institute, which awards it, has been in serious damage control mode. Last Friday, after Ms. Machado floated the idea of sharing the prize with Mr. Trump in a Fox News interview, the Institute offered a reminder about what the rules governing the award allow, saying that the facts were clear and well established. Once a Nobel Prize is announced, it cannot be revoked, shared, or transferred to others, the Institute wrote. The decision is final and stands for all time. Ms. Machado's trip to Washington also drew derision from those now in power in Venezuela. Speaking in Caracas on Thursday, Venezuela's interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez, who gained the Trump administration's support in taking over after Mr. Maduro's ouster, took aim at Ms. Machado in a thinly veiled reference. "And if one day, as acting president, I have to go to Washington, I will do so with my head held high, not on my knees," she said. It is far from the first time the Nobel Committee has been criticized for its choice, or been accused of abetting violent leaders or governments. Global outrage followed the choice of President Barack Obama, who at the time was presiding over military engagements on several continents. Less than a year after receiving the award, Abiy Ahmed, the president of Ethiopia, embarked on a scorched earth campaign in his country's Tigray region that left hundreds of thousands dead, wounded, and starving. Henry Kissinger and Lee Duc-to were awarded the prize before a ceasefire to end the Vietnam War broke down, with Mr. Kissinger ultimately trying to return the prize amid a wave of protests. His North Vietnamese counterpart rejected it outright. What makes the dispute swirling around Ms. Machado unusual, according to Asle Sveen, a former researcher at the Nobel Institute, is Norwegians' particularly dim view of Mr. Trump. Ms. Machado has dedicated her Peace Prize to a highly controversial president, to put it mildly, Mr. Sveen said. It is nearly universally accepted in Norway that Donald Trump attacks liberal democracy. Not all Norwegians agree that the award to Ms. Machado was a mistake. If it turned out that she supported the U.S. boat strikes, that would not be the best reflection on a laureate, said Marianne Dahl, research director at the Peace Research Institute, Oslo. But Ms. Machado was awarded for her pro-democracy work in 2024, Ms. Dahl said. She drew similarities between Ms. Machado and past winners who led popular movements in Nazi Germany, apartheid South Africa, and Soviet republics, as well as during the so-called Arab Spring. It is easy to sit in comfortable Norway and criticize her for talking sweet to Trump, Ms. Dahl said. That, she noted, is exactly what many European and even Norwegian leaders have done. And they don't have a repressive regime pursuing them, as Machado has had, she said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Nearly 5 million accounts removed under Australia's new social media ban. Governments around the world are watching the rollout of the landmark law, which made it illegal for those under 16 to have accounts. By Laura Chung and Victoria Kim. Nearly 5 million social media accounts belonging to Australian teenagers have been deactivated or removed a month after a landmark law barring those younger than 16 from using the services took effect, the government said on Thursday. The announcement was the first reported metric reflecting the rollout of the law, which is being closely watched by several other countries, weighing whether the regulation can be a blueprint for protecting children from the harms of social media or a cautionary tale highlighting the challenges of such attempts. The law required 10 social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and Reddit, to prevent users under 16 from accessing their services. Under the law, which came into force in December, failure by the companies to take reasonable steps to remove underage users could lead to fines of up to 49.5 million Australian dollars, about $33 million. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has praised the law as a world-first attempt to shield young teens from the mental health detriments and potential abuses of social media. On Thursday, he said it was encouraging to see social media companies making a meaningful effort to keep children off their platforms. Change doesn't happen overnight, he said, but these early signs show it's important we've acted to make this change. The number of removed accounts offered only a limited picture of the ban's impact. Many teenagers have said in the weeks since the law took effect that they were able to get around the ban by lying about their age, or that they could easily bypass verification systems. The regulator tasked with enforcing and tracking the law, the eSafety Commissioner, did not release a detailed breakdown beyond announcing that the companies had removed access to about 4.7 million accounts belonging to children under 16. Meta, the parent company of Instagram and Facebook, said this week that it had removed almost 550,000 accounts of users younger than 16 before the ban came into effect. Several governments around the world, including Denmark, the European Union, France, New Zealand, and Malaysia, have said they are considering similar bans. Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain told members of Parliament this week that he was considering it, according to reports. Julie Inman Grant, the eSafety Commissioner, acknowledged there would still be some underage teenagers on social media, but said the law's success should ultimately be measured by a broader reduction in harm that could take years to become apparent. Speed limits, for instance, are not a failure because some people speed, she said. Most would agree that roads are safer because of them. Jack Oakhill, 15, was among the teenagers who found themselves locked out of their social media accounts last month. He had built a following of 1,500 people on Instagram, which he used to connect with his peers to promote his political podcast, Your First Vote. I was quite frankly annoyed when I opened my phone, went on Instagram to check what's happening, and it said, "I'm logged out," he said. Jack said he created a new Instagram account using his mother's details to post his content until he turns 16 later this year, when he will be able to reclaim his old account. His mother manages the new account, he said. While he understood the need to limit exposure to harmful content and to stop online abuse, he said the government should have forced companies to make their platforms a safe place for children, rather than impose a blanket ban. "I'm old enough to know what's happening in the world," he said, "but the government is treating us like children." Another Australian teen, 14-year-old Reeve, said that he was able to continue using his YouTube account by changing his age, and that his account on Reddit remained active. Most of his peers seem unaffected by the ban, he said. "It's undoubtedly done nothing, from my view," said Reeve, who asked that he only be identified by his first name because he is a minor. His father was prompted by YouTube on his own account to verify his age with an ID or a photo, while Reeve's account was not flagged, according to the teenager. He said he was well attuned to the pitfalls of social media, having been bullied for videos he posted when he was 9 years old. He has also observed a schoolmate who appeared to become steeped in far-right racist views from things he was exposed to on social media, he said. Even though Reeve was happy that he could still access his accounts, he said he was disappointed in what he felt was an inadequate effort by the government to make sure that young people were more thoroughly protected from the dangers of social media. Critics of the law have also cautioned that a blanket ban may disproportionately affect minors, teens living in remote areas who connect with peers online, or young people living with disabilities who may have found communities through social media. Finally today, runaway emu leads Florida corporal in 45-minute police chase. A corporal in St. Johns County had responded to what he thought would be a straightforward call about an animal on the loose. Nearly an hour later, he was putting handcuffs on an emu named Tina. By Amanda Holpuch. Each day that Corporal Thomas Keisler reports to work at the sheriff's office in St. Johns County, Florida, there is a chance he'll come face-to-face with an animal on the road. In his 25 years of working in a county with farmland and rural areas, he's seen officers encounter horses, goats, pigs, cows, turkeys, and ducks. But last Friday brought a new creature to his patch, a runaway emu. The corporal was sent to wrangle one bobbing along a county road. It's certainly different than coming across a horse or a cow because it was literally like trying to restrain a miniature velociraptor, Corporal Keisler said in a phone interview on Thursday. When he got the call about the loose bird, he underestimated what it would take to get the situation under control. Agricultural deputies usually respond to that type of call, he said, but they were in training when the emu went on the road. I figured I can handle something like this oversized turkey, he said. How hard could it be, after all, to grab a large and flightless bird? According to body camera footage, which was released by the sheriff's office on Wednesday, considerably harder than expected. Corporal Keisler and the emu named Tina would ultimately spend about 45 minutes together. The footage shows only about 2 minutes of their entanglement, which appears mutually frustrating. At first, Tina walks at an unhurried pace along the county road as the corporal tries to get her to come toward him. Corporal Keisler even sounds upbeat, but as the video continues, the occasional deep sigh is audible. Tina just keeps sauntering away. At one point, Corporal Keisler has his hands on Tina. She runs away. An emu like Tina, who had escaped from a farm, is not so easy to catch. Though emus can't fly with their tiny, useless wings, they have powerful legs and will use their heavy feet to strike, according to the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. Emus are the second largest bird in the world after ostriches and can be from 4.9 to 6.2 feet tall and weigh from 66 to 121 pounds. Adult female emus are larger and heavier than males. Corporal Keisler said that his past experience with animals had proved to be pretty useless in apprehending Tina. We don't get emu combat training and restraining for some reason. Or I've never had that, he said. Maybe I missed that day of training. Toward the end of their battle, Corporal Keisler put handcuffs on Tina's legs because she had ripped holes in his uniform and he needed to stop her from kicking him. That was really the only option that I had because she had cornered herself in an area that was going to be very difficult to bring her out, he said. At that point, Tina's owner knew her bird was on the loose and was able to meet the corporal and the bird under arrest. The sheriff's office did not say where the bird is usually housed. Tina calmed down immediately when she was reunited with her owner, the corporal said. The owner brought her some food, and it was the most gentle creature I've seen, he said, but it's not what it showed me. Corporal Keisler was happy that the owner was there too, and said of Tina, I think we were both kind of over each other at that point. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Friday, January 16th issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Chris Wilhelm. Thank you for listening.